Hello and welcome to 2024 Tampa Bay Buccaneers team preview. Baker Mayfield got paid, but will the clock strike midnight on his Cinderella, career resurgence? Rachaad White was a fantasy superstar last year, but now at the higher price tag, should you still be going after him? Mike Evans also got paid, also still a baller, but will father time come for him? Chris Godwin, Cade, Otton, that's right, we're covering all the fantasy relevant stars here over the next 30 minutes. Strap in, let's get after it. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. Welcome again to the Fantasy Life Show. And joining me, as always, is none other than Fantasy Life Director of Analytics and all-around rock star, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. And yeah, Dwain, Baker Mayfield last year, top 12 numbers in EPA per dropback, passer rating, and yards per attempt. Fluke, or is he simply a good NFL quarterback?
I think he's a below average NFL quarterback. Is this just a great way to start the show or what? Look, I mean, he's averaged 227 passing yards per game for his career. Last year, he was at 238. I mean, so like for fantasy purposes, which is the part we really care the most about, he got a slight bump up. My guess is that's mostly because you got the ball out with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I will give him props though, Ian. Who would have thought that the narrative would be Mike Evans is better with Baker Mayfield than he was with Tom Brady? So when you get Baker on the field, he is willing to live that YOLO life. So I think that can end up being really good for some of the surrounding cast. But as far as us considering Baker for fantasy purposes, obviously in most redraft leagues, the kind of things most people are going to be playing in, I wouldn't touch Baker Mayfield. I don't really want him on my roster. I'm going to leave him out there on the waiver wire. If I'm wrong on that call, I'll just go down with the ship. I'll have to live with it. But yeah, I agree with you that all of his underlying metrics that more the NFL cares about, the coaches care about. He was a smarter decision maker, all those things last year, even though he was still living some YOLO. So improvement, but for fantasy purposes, yeah, it's hard to get excited about Baker, in my opinion.
Again, I said some really nice numbers about him to start, and he was still just a QB 17 in fantasy points per game last year. So kudos for the playoff performances. I mean, if you actually go back, this is one of my favorite stats right now. Over the past 5 years, only Patrick Mahomes with 7 and Josh Allen with 4 have more playoff games with at least 3 passing touchdowns and 300 passing yards than Baker Mayfield. That said, let's face it, Eagles and Lions, great performances. Probably 2 of the bottom 5, bottom 10 secondaries in the NFL last season. Certainly got assisted with that. And Dwain, again, Baker, I've defended him a little bit over the years because 2018 comes in, breaks the rookie, passing record before Justin Herbert ended up taking it, leads the Browns to their first playoff victory in 26 freaking years. And then, after that, 2021 happens, tears his shoulder labrum and early on in week 2, and then, pretty much ruins that season. 2022 goes to the Panthers, hardly the first quarterback we've seen not be able to get anything going there. And then finally kind of came to a somewhat stable environment with Tampa Bay and proceeded to have his best season ever. So not completely out on him being a legit top 20, maybe even top 15 real life quarterback, just harder to get over that in fantasy land. But I will say, guys, no quarterback had a larger difference in terms of turnover-worthy plays and actual turnovers than Baker last season, aka might be due for some negative regression in that department. But final note, Dwain, if the Buccaneers had not beat the Panthers 9-0 in week 18 last season, do you think Baker Mayfield would still be the Buccaneers QB1?
Oh man, I think probably just because the way the demand works around quarterbacks and the fact that, the supply is low. The reality is there's not really 32 starting quarterbacks on the planet. Baker is in a group where you can at least function as an offense. So he's probably back, just considering what the Bucs had to deal with from a draft capital standpoint. I know Buccaneer fans will, they may hate this, maybe they wouldn't, but the better outcome last year would have been a complete tank season when you had the quarterbacks you could go after at the top of this year's draft. But it is what it is. Stay scrappy, keep doing your thing. I mean, the Bucs outperformed expectations.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves and get into the win total thing, but I just feel like this was a roster that was so close to just being torn down. And then, got a little bit of late season magic and now, bringing everyone back for one last dance. We'll see what happens. But hey, another guy who obviously is back and set for a big role. Rachaad White, rode that sweet volume last year to an RB10 finish. Do you expect the season to be any different, Dwain? Because yes, it did add Bucky Irving, but historically, we don't expect day 3 rookies to, come in and take over a backfield.
I think the door's open just because of how inefficient Rachaad White has been. Now, all of the offseason talk, for what it's worth, sometimes these things are worth something, sometimes they're not, has been positive around Rachaad White. I mean, it started off with, we've got a checklist of things we really want him to work on, essentially. That was what the coaching staff said. And then as we got through minicamp and OTAs, the next quotes were, and he's responded well to those things, but there are things we want him to keep working on. So it sounds like Rachaad White is doing the right things. To your point, we don't that often see a day 3 rookie running back come in, steal a bunch of touches. I will say the quotes that we've heard around Bucky Irving and how decisive he is, that's what it sounds like they want, is a more decisive runner, which if you've ever watched Rachaad White, you guys know he's the opposite of that. Like if I were to comp Rachaad White to someone, he's a poor man's Le'Veon Bell. And I mean super poor man. But same kind of style, wants to sit behind the line, bait a linebacker, and then he wants to make that little jump cut and hop into the next hole and get moving. Hasn't worked out for Rachaad White like it did for Le'Veon Bell. But remember, early in his career, Le'Veon, year 1, like he was really not efficient either, Ian, and no one wanted to draft him in fantasy. And suddenly he came out a changed man, and he was really good. I think the big thing here with Rachaad White is he has a solid receiving profile. I don't see him losing the passing down work. He also has the size to block at the NFL level. I think that's going to be a concern for Bucky Irving. A lot of people think Bucky Irving is like this high-end receiving talent. He was electric with the ball in his hands out of the backfield, but he wasn't someone that was really trusted that often in college to handle a ton of the pass down work. So I think Bucky Irvin's a compliment. I would never say never on the door not being open because he is a decisive runner, but he's also a smaller guy.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, the Le'Veon comp really holds up when we do consider that White is a plus receiver. I mean, that is where we're putting the eggs in the basket if you're in on Rachaad White this year. I mean, 6th among 47 running backs, yards per reception, yards after the catch per reception, and passer rating when targeted last season. If you're into ESPN's receiver ratings, they said only CMC was a better overall receiver, and just pure production, man. Only McCaffrey and Breece Hall had more total PPR points from receiving than White last season. So I'll cut him a little bit of slack, unlike Josh Jacobs in Vegas, where we had to say, well, the environment wasn't great, but why was Zamir White better? Rachaad White has been in a pretty bad environment that hasn't yielded any really efficient rushers over these past few seasons. Specifically, Buccaneers 26th and then 31st in rushing yards before contact per carry. But on the other side of things, Dwain, like we've seen Josh Jacobs before last year being an offense where the yards per carry wasn't great, but still forcing a lot of missed tackles, still, racking up a lot of yards after contact. And that is where White falls flat. Among 49 qualified running backs, 35th or worse in literally everything. I challenge you guys to show me a meaningful advanced metric where he was not among the league's bottom 15 running backs. But hey, guess what? Efficiency doesn't matter when you keep that sweet volume. White joined Alvin Kamara, Etienne, Barkley, and Joe Mixon as top 12 running backs last season, averaging 4 or fewer yards per carry. So again, just comes down to that receiving usage and if he can maintain it. Want to shout out Jonathan Fuller, did a ton of really good, prospect profiles for us over on FantasyLife.com that you can still read. And he had the following note about Bucky Irving as a receiver. After having watched a decent amount of his college touches, I would describe Irving as more of a reliable receiving back rather than a dynamic one. He doesn't appear to be a great route runner, and most of his receiving work came on dump-offs and screen passes. And in 27 games at Oregon, Irving had a negative average depth of target in 20 of those games and only eclipsed a 1-yard ADOT in 5 of those contests. So while he was productive, 7 PPR points per game from just receiving, that was more than any other prominent RB in this draft class. It does seem like, for me, Dwain, Bucky probably more of a threat to Chase Edmonds' backup role than Rachaad White's starting role, at least to start.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think late in the season, if Rachaad White, for whatever reason, regresses in the areas that this coaching staff is wanting him to be better at, and if the Bucs are losing, which we've talked about the roster, isn't really that great of an all-around roster. I could see it being something where all of a sudden we look up and Bucky Irving has a larger role than we think late in the season. I think early in the season, this is definitely Rachaad White's job to lose. Obviously, we'll keep an eye on it through training camp. But yeah, overall, I think we're completely aligned on it. I just don't want to completely rule out Bucky Irving because the coaches have said some very specific things they want. And we know that Bucky Irving is a decisive runner, even though he's not that big.
And he certainly is cheap enough. So I'm going to do a better job with, approaching some of the ESPN redraft ADPs. I know we talk a lot about underdog here, and we talk about underdog because it's sharper, but guess what? If we're all playing an ESPN and it's softer ADP, well, let's exploit those, freaking bad ADPs out here. So looking again, just across the industry right now, Bucky Irving, pick 175 at underdog, and then, going across to sleeper, he's pick 183, and FFC and FFPC, 175 or later as well. So again, I don't want to hate on anyone that's going well outside the top 150 picks like Bucky Irving. Really do think he is one of those guys at the end of your drafts. If you are looking for a handcuff running back, I mean, hey, Dwain, White goes down in week 2. We're probably going to see Bucky Irving on the cover of most waiver wire articles ahead of week 3. So has that receiving upside we look for in our handcuffs. Don't discount Bucky Irving making some things happen, particularly late in the 2024 season. Obviously, though, this passing game goes through one man and one man only. Kinda, yeah, Mike Evans is a star, but I was surprised to see, Dwain, again, based on the production, I think people probably would have expected the target discrepancy to be bigger between Mike Evans and Chris Godwin last year. Evans finished with 136 total targets and Godwin just 130. So while Evans had the higher ADOT and, was being featured a bit more in the red zone, I mean, it really is, I should say, a battle with Godwin. Like, was he bad, and is he just bad now, or was he just unlucky? Because my God, man, only caught 1 of 10 end zone targets, tied with OBJ for the worst mark in the league. And, he has now posted back-to-back career low marks in yards per route run. Maybe not a coincidence that those have come after his 2021 season-ending knee injury. So thoughts on Evans and Godwin, if you expect Godwin to close the gap a bit in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, the knee injury could certainly be part of it. Losing Tom Brady being at the end of his career, then you get Baker Mayfield. That can also be part of it.
Small variable, Dwain.
Quarterbacks definitely impact yards per route run, guys. So I think the positive thing here for Chris Godwin is you get Liam Cohen. And so Liam Cohen is from that Sean McVay tree of coaching. He is hopefully going to bring more motion. We should see more Chris Godwin from the slot. We've even heard that out of OTAs. Minicamp News has talked more about Chris Godwin potentially being on the move, things like that, not leaving the team, but being in motion. And so those things do line up with what we've seen from Rams offenses. Not to say he's going to suddenly turn into Cooper Kupp. I laugh when I hear people, he's in the Cooper Kupp role. He's going to be Cooper Kupp. Well, Cooper Kupp's also freaking Cooper Kupp. Okay. And yeah, then he on top of that gets to play in a really cool role where he has a coach that's very smart and knows how to get in mismatches. So the beauty is Chris Godwin should see more mismatches this season. And if that happens, then we could see a bounce back in yards per route run. And ultimately that would mean a potentially, more fantasy points for us. But if you look at motion, Ian, a route with motion is worth 55% more than a route without motion in PPR points per route over the last 3 years. So that could be a really big positive for Godwin because, to your point, they were close. Mike Evans had a 25% target share and Chris Godwin had 24%. Okay. So I think there's something to that. I think those guys are both, it's really almost a 1A more than a 1A, 1B or a 2A if you're thinking fantasy. These guys are both, Evans is a wide receiver too because he hits the big plays. Godwin hasn't. Godwin, he needs touchdown regression. And you mentioned it, not catching 1 out of 10. He only caught 1 out of 10 opportunities to score touchdowns, with targets at, what was it, in the end zone or in the red zone? I can't remember what you
end
said.
Zone.
But end zone. But I mean, Godwin, just over the last couple of years, the touchdown stuff has been brutal. But part of that is his role. He's not a dynamic playmaker like he used to be. He's more of like this PPR underneath magnet. But the motion, things like that could open up some opportunity for some more big plays.
Love the remarks again about the Cooper Kupp role. Like the implication that Kupp would just be this dirt average wide receiver if he didn't play in the slot always kills me. But hey, guess what? It certainly helps Cooper Kupp. It helps guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it should help Godwin as well. Last year was the first time he played far more snaps out wide than inside since 2018. And looking at last year specifically, 2.95 yards per route run from the slot, 1.86 elsewhere. So you do regularly see a nice, jump in yards per route run from the slot compared to elsewhere. That's not, Godwin specific or anything, but yeah, it should help. So final thing here, Dwain, again, Mike Evans was obviously the star last year, 10 for 10 and 1,000 yard seasons at this point. And I mean, it didn't look like he was slipping. I mean, last time we saw him on a football field, he torched the Lions for 147 yards and a touchdown. 2.23 yards per route run on the season, was 12th among 80 qualified wide receivers. So he does turn 31 in August. You've had a fantastic age cliff article live on Fantasy Life now for about a week or two. What did your findings tell you about Evans, and if we should expect a rather Ned Stark fall off here in 2024?
Yeah, if you haven't seen the article, I really do encourage you to go see it because it's something you can apply really to all these players. And I do break down all the guys that are going to be age 30 plus this season. Mike Evans is at the age where a cliff can happen. However, what I will say is for guys that have been elite in his career, which certainly, I mean, you just talked about Mike Evans, he is in the elite category. I looked at that as being at least 3 wide receiver 1 finishes on your career resume. For those guys, only 22% of them dropped off the cliff, meaning they dropped to a wide receiver 4 finish or worse without some sort of warning sign. Now, the warning signs were injuries. Okay, that impacts the guy we just talked about, Cooper Kupp. The other thing that impacted it was you saw a gradual step down in fantasy points per game. And then the last thing was looking at their ability to still get open against man coverage. Once you went to these guys that were age 30 plus and started breaking down their data by route and zone coverage, the man coverage stuff really picked up a lot of signal in predicting what was going to happen the next year. Not perfect, guys, but it did move up in rank. And while Evans was a freaking monster last year against man coverage, no one could stop him. So I don't think that there's really the danger that we typically get with a 31-plus-year-old wide receiver here with Evans. I think the biggest danger is a potential regression from Baker Mayfield and just how much do we trust him and this overall passing game.
Evans right now going at the round 2-3 turn in best ball land, more of a mid-third round pick, across sites like ESPN, Sleeper, and whatnot. Godwin, meanwhile, is going pick 83 over at ESPN. That is towards the end of round 7. So those prices, certainly a bit more, I think, reasonable. But I will say, Dwain, more drafts than not, I am not going in, trying to prioritize getting pieces of this Buccaneers passing game. Do you agree?
Agree. Yeah, I agree. Like I'm mixing in Mike Evans, but let's talk home league here. I'm sitting at the end of the second round, and I've got a choice between Mike Evans and a Jalen Waddle, Mike Evans, and even potentially a Malik Neighbors.
I was just about to say, man, give me Neighbors.
Yeah, I get to draft one time, and I hate that because, look, Mike Evans has been a really great player, and we could end up being wrong on that take, but there is a chance that he does hit that cliff, right? Even though, for the most part, I'm not that worried about it, there's still a 1 in 5 chance he hits it this year. So when I get to that and I have to create these coin flip situations, I want to lean a little bit more to the younger player personally.
Dwain and I doubting Mike Evans on a podcast. What could go wrong? Surely
we still love him. Like we've said all the positive things. We're just saying when you get in these tight spots and you got to decide between him and some of these other guys, I'm gonna lean to the youth.
I was joking around on Twitter where I was like, Puka Nacua, consensus wide receiver 7. I have him wide receiver 10, which means I hate him and his entire family. Like that's the only, takeaway we can have from that. But guys, much more on this new offensive system. As Dwain said, Liam Cohen, new OC. We got some cool takeaways. But first, here's a message from the one, the only Matthew Berry on a new cool little thing we have going on called FantasyLife Plus.
When I started Fantasy Life, I had one mission in mind, really just one: fantasy football and sports betting for all. And what started out as just a newsletter has now grown into a full-fledged media company. And here I am to tell you we're ready to evolve yet again. I'm introducing FantasyLife Plus. It's a premium product built upon a suite of fantasy and sports betting tools to take your game to the next level. I know, I hear you, really, Barry, a premium product? Okay, I understand, but get this. Our mission has not changed, right? Our newsletter will forever remain free. All of our expert analysis, free. And we will still provide sets of fantasy football rankings for free. Everything you need to be a great fantasy football manager, you will still be able to do for free at FantasyLife.com. But hey, if you really want to level up, then FantasyLife Plus is for you. FantasyLife Plus will introduce new tools like our Draft Champion, customizable rankings, site-wide league sync integration, player prop models, game models, DFS pick'em builders, and so much more. Seriously, just check it out. Go to FantasyLife.com to learn more. And as always, may your trades never be vetoed, may your flex plays always work out, and may your Monday Night Miracles always come through.
All right, everyone, again, on to some of the offensive changes. Yes, we do still have head coach Todd Bowles back running the defense, but new OC to replace Dave Canales is going to be Liam Cohen, who has spent the better part of the last 6 years either working with Sean McVay and the Rams or running Kentucky's offense over in the college ranks. So, Dwain, we did see Cohen and Baker Mayfield briefly cross paths down the end of 2022. And, I mean, was better than certainly, the film he put on, just out there with the Panthers. So, hey, this is the reigning 13th ranked offensive offensive line. They returned 4 or 5 of those linemen from last year. Again, we got Evans, we got Godwin, Rachaad White, decent enough. I'd even say plus receiving back, certainly a decent enough NFL running back as a whole. Overall thoughts on what Cohen can maybe bring to this group?
I think it's going to be interesting, and it's hard to say for sure because a lot of times when we get these guys that are from these trees, but they had all these different roles, we don't always know how much they're going to implement. But if he does carry over some of the things from McVay, it could be a boost for this offense. We already talked about the motion, how much that's worth. If you look at the Rams, last season they were 3rd in motion at the snap. If you look at play action passing, you're also going to see Sean McVay ranking higher than most coaches in the league. So if he brings both of those things over and we get an increase, then that would be really positive. One thing I'll say about these coaching scheme changes and stuff, the quarterback really matters. I think like when you look at some of the quarterbacks, they don't like play action, man. Like they don't like getting under center and turning their back to the defense. So it'll come down to what does Baker also like. But I think the biggest chance here is to see more motion plays, getting Chris Godwin inside to the slot. So if there was one player in this offense that I think benefits the most with Liam Cohen coming in, if he implements these changes, it is Chris Godwin.
Yeah. Fingers crossed that Godwin starts partying again like it's 2019, 2020. Again, Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield, certainly, playing a bigger role than perhaps even we are giving it credit for. But
on Godwin, you mentioned it. You're getting him really as a low-end wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 4 in your draft. That's probably you're drafting him at his floor, I think.
Yeah.
So there is a ceiling case where suddenly he's a wide receiver 2. It's going to be tough because Baker supporting 2 guys that could be wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2. It's tough at his historical yards per game, but Liam Cohen could also help boost Baker a little bit where there's enough room there to maybe get 2 wide receiver 2s out of this offense.
I mean, Godwin is someone that last year Dwain finished as the wide receiver 35, even with things not going great. So again, even just a little bit of an uptick, we could be flirting with a wide receiver 2 finish. And if not, well, you pretty much got what you paid for in the first place. So good note there. Guys, takes us to our win total. I think you can probably put together Dwain and I are not the highest on the Buccaneers this year, but Vegas really isn't either. I mean, they have an 8.5 win total plus 100 on the over. Other books are at 7.5 and, have a minus 150 heavy juice on the over. So it certainly seems like Vegas is projecting this team to be 8-9. I am taking the under, Dwain. And look, it does have to do with this offense where, okay, Jalen McMillan, we'll talk about him more in a little bit. I do think it's a decent enough, upgrade, but it's not like this group was just a bunch of world beaters from last season. I mean, we're talking about the reigning 20th ranked scoring offense. If anything, I thought it was this defense that rose up and, really helped elevate them into playoff contention. Again, shut out the Panthers with the season on the line in week 18. Sadly, though, they lost Carlton Davis, Shaq Barrett, and Devin White. Managed to, bring back Winfield and Levante David. So, they had some tough decisions to make and everything. But again, this is an aging roster that, again, I think if they had lost week 18 last year, would have been more or less tearing the whole thing down. Give me under 8.5 wins. Maybe they finish 8-9, but yeah, I got the under. What say you?
Yeah, another line I wouldn't really want to put a lot of money on, but if I were to bet it, I would definitely take the under on this one. So it already comes back to Baker. I just don't know that I see him being a guy. I think the key will be the defense. The defense is going to have to play really well. If it does, then I think the offense could be good enough to not keep the team from winning. But I don't think the offense is going to be what makes the team a winning team. And you and I both know being able to pass the ball and be a prolific passing offense is still the best way, right, to push your way into the playoffs, push your way to a high win total. I've got the Bucs right now projected for 224 passing yards per game, which is, not the lowest mark I've got. Hey, I've got the freaking Patriots down there at 201, which is just insane, but it's definitely below average.
Honestly, man, if we can get a decent line at under 8.5, like minus 115 or something, I think this is one that I would prioritize. They now got to face a first place schedule. I think this division as a whole is going to be much better. Cousins on the Falcons. The Panthers certainly can't get worse. Saints should still at least be a formidable opponent. Yeah, we are taking under here, maybe myself a little bit stronger than Mr. McFarland. But yeah, under on the Bucs. But hey, if you guys think we are wrong, you can go ahead and take those thoughts and that money over to the Draftkings Sportsbook, our partners who we are, obviously big fans of. So again, guys, right now, all new customers who bet just $5 will get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings app now and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. Whether you want to bet on NFL futures, maybe a UFC fight night coming up, Rose Namajunas versus Tracy Cortez, Thug Rose doing her thing at flyweight these days. Also have Drew Dober in a guaranteed firecracker of a fight there in the featured fight. So looking forward to that. But yeah, guys, again, download the DraftKings app now. Sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. You can bet just $5 on anything and receive $150 in bonus bets instantly. And if sports betting is not yet available in your state, not to worry. DraftKings is the one-stop shop for all things daily fantasy, where you can join in on all the fun and have a shot to win cash prizes. Love those best ball streets, where you can find Dwain and myself this Friday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern. So again, guys, promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. All right, Dwain, we have reached the position battle segment of our team preview podcast. Really is looking like the wide receiver 3 spot. We have third-round rookie Jalen McMillan heralding from Washington, and also incumbent number 3 wide receiver Trey Palmer. Maybe Baker's old Oklahoma friend Sterling Shepard has something to say about this. I love me some Sterling Shepard, but my God, if the injury gods could just chill out on this dude for a change, that would help. But it really does kind of come down to, Dwain, how set are they on using Godwin in the slot? Because McMillan did spend 67% of his snaps in college, in the slot final 3 years. That said, Todd Bowles does seem to be, looking at McMillan as someone that can actually do a bit more. I do wonder, though. Here's the Bowles quote. He had a lot of versatility in college. He played slot, he played Z, he played X, so he's a very intelligent player. So that gives us some advantages. That's cool. That's also your defensive-minded head coach just saying a nice thing about the wide receiver they just drafted in round 3. Probably not going to be all that in charge of, exactly lining up McMillan throughout the year. So how do you see this going? Because as much as I do believe McMillan is the better, prospect, the better overall player, if they are really insistent on, pigeonholing Godwin into the slot more, now maybe that makes more sense for Trey Palmer to be the guy on the outside in 3 wide receiver sets.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the same quote as that. The most telling quote I heard about McMillan, and you don't always know that the coach intentionally said this, but at the end of one of his quotes, Bowles mentioned that, and we have a lot of other guys behind McMillan. And that was the thing that I thought was interesting. Who knows if that's just, if that was a slip of the tongue and they really see him as being, the third guy, or just mentioning really more what he meant is we've got a bunch of guys, battling for that spot. So I thought that was the most telling thing that I've heard. But again, can I put 100% confidence in it? Probably not. But McMillan, I do think, is someone that can play all the different spots. So if I had to pick a Buccaneer to take at the end of drafts and I'm needing a wide receiver, it would be McMillan. To your point, I think that he and Trey Palmer have very different skill sets. And so I could see this being more of a rotation. When you're looking to stretch the field, you want to kick Godwin inside. I know obviously Mike Evans can always stretch the field. So it just depends on probably what your route concepts are, what you're trying to achieve on the play. But I could certainly see a scenario where really it's McMillan and Palmer splitting time, depending on what they're trying to do in a certain matchup against a certain team.
If I say names like Demarcus Robinson, Greg Dortch, Rashad Bateman, Javon Baker, you take McMillan over all of them, any of them? Because again, he's someone where, yes, certain lineups and best ball, fine, but I don't see myself going out of my way for McMillan, in my home draft or anything.
Yeah, you're probably not. But I will say if you're in a deeper league and let's say you've already drafted, a really solid wide receiver squad, maybe you've got some veterans up top, then I would lean McMillan over a Demarcus Robinson. But if I took 3 or 4 rookies, out of my 6 players I've taken so far at wide receiver, I'm probably taking Demarcus Robinson. So I think some of it comes back to, okay, how are you trying to balance out your roster? Are you going to maybe need points early in the season because you can't start someone like Rome Odunze? Well, then I'm leaning to Demarcus Robinson. Or no, I'm looking for late season upside or someone that just might surprise me in week 1 that I don't have to spend all my waiver wire dollars on. Well, then that would be McMillan.
And I will say, look, if you're in one of these
Javon Baker above McMillan, though. I'm taking Javon Baker over him every time.
Good note. And yeah, man, but if you're in one of these drafts where you're going 20 rounds or, you just don't have as many spots to fill out, no kickers or defenses or something like that going on. Hey, sometimes it might just be as easy as take the almost free day 2 wide receiver and hopefully good things end up happening. So again, not trying to pretend like we know exactly how it's going to play out. Maybe McMillan is indeed a dog. I knew, good amount of draft analysts out there that believed he was in fact, better than at least Jalen Polk in that Washington offense. But yeah, at least for this year, questionable quarterback production, as we talked about, and easily the number 3 wide receiver, just not quite the situation in 2024 specifically. I want to make a habit of betting on too much. I think, Dwain, that also applies to the tight end room. I mean, Cade Otton last year, we could not have asked for a more full-time role. I mean, he had a 91% snap rate, not even routes. So you can imagine how great the routes were, but 91% plus snap rate in each and every game. And he finished as a tight end 24 in PPR points per game. So good showings in the playoffs. If you want to go ahead and include those and, include that production for every tight end, he does get up to tight end 17, but they just haven't really cared about him that much, Dwain. And maybe Liam Cohen comes in and changes that. But I mean, end zone targets last year, Evans and Goffman combined for 31. Otton only had 8. So hey, you get to the deep, depths of the tight end position. You need a second one, tight end premium. Okay, we can talk. But man, if you're going into a regular just redraft league and coming away with Otton as your tight end 1, I think something went wrong.
Yeah, something definitely went wrong. With Otton, like the best part about him is that he plays all the time. Last year, he had an 89% route participation. So you're just going to have some weeks where you're going to fall into things where the progression just takes the quarterback to you. Mike Evans, covered. Chris Godwin, covered. Okay, throw it to Cade Otton. You guys have to remember, 70% of quarterback throws are to the first read. So I mean, most of the time they're going to their first read. Then they might get to the second read, and occasionally they have to go to a third read, which is often a check down, which can be equated to the tight end many times, depending on what kind of routes they're running. So yeah, the beauty of Otton, he's always on the field, so he's going to fall into some production, but there's going to be a lot more weeks than not that you're not going to be happy with your with the box score.
Are you with me on prioritizing guys like Noah Fant, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, maybe even a Tyler Conklin ahead of Otton?
Yeah, I think the upside case you could talk about for any of those guys is higher, just because when I look at Jonnu, I think Mike McDaniel, and I think about an explosive offense, a lot of target competition. But if things went right, we could have a passing attack that throws for over 300 yards per game. I have the Dolphins projected to be the number 1 passing attack, right? I've got the Bucs in the bottom third of the league. So in that point, it just simply becomes a tiebreaker. Give me the better offense.
All right, guys, as always at the end
I have to redo my ranks now, Hardit.
As always, at the end of our team preview episodes, we were going to comp the Buccaneers to a TV or a movie character. I'm going to roll with just kind of the general Indians on Major League 2, Dwain, because things went surprisingly well in the first Major League. They win the division after being, considered a laughingstock in the NFL. But now with newfound contender expectations, a lot of guys that weren't even expected to be on the roster are suddenly making money and having these confirmed starting roles. And again, largely looks the same. I know in the movie, the Tribe added, Jack Parkman, so we don't quite have that addition going on in Tampa Bay. But will the magic repeat itself? It did by the end of the movie, but it is a movie for a reason. Yeah, I will say the sequel was not anywhere near as good as the first one. So I tend to think that's more so going to be the moral of the story here. With the Buccaneers, I would be surprised if they are not resetting and trying to find a new head coach and maybe even a new quarterback by 2025. So otherwise, yeah, super optimistic about this season. So what say you, Dwain?
I'm going with Ricky Bobby for Baker Mayfield, because if you were to have to pick a character for Baker Mayfield, is there a better one? What quarterback would be more likely to be going to their car after hanging out with some buddies and there be a cougar in the car? There's no one. I mean, maybe you could equate that to a Panther.
Maybe Minshew.
Maybe Minshew. Yeah, that's a good one. Minshew would be a good one. Maybe you could take that as there's a Panther in the car, and maybe that means at least they're still better than the Panthers this year. But I would go with Ricky Bobby. He tries to portray the ultimate confidence on the exterior, but I think he knows on the inside he's got some holes in his game. And look, that's no knock on Baker. He's a freaking pro NFL quarterback. I'm not. And you got to have an ego. You got to go out there. And teammates seem to love Baker. They respond really well to him. But I just feel like Baker would probably be one of the most fun guys to hang out if I was like 15 years younger than I am now and I wanted to party. Still with a guy that, he's not young by league standards, but I bet he still knows how to party.
Hey, man, toughest position in sports, and he's probably one of the top 20 guys in the world at it. But sadly, if you're not top 10, really can be tough to, overly change the direction of an NFL franchise. But we will see what happens. I want to thank you guys again for tuning into the Fantasy Life show. You can read my team preview on the Buccaneers over at FantasyLife.com. New website with our handy dandy premium products. So not leaving you guys totally hanging or anything. You still have access to some free rankings. But yeah, got some really, really cool stuff behind the paywall. Draft draft champion modes, just mock draft simulators, things that, again, can truly take you from already really freaking good. I mean, you're listening to us for a reason. Am I right, guys? To great in a hurry. So again, invite you guys to check that out. And yeah, links are all in the description. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.